Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at something fundamental today, trust in design. Um, Beyond just the flashy visuals, how do we create digital experiences that people actually rely on?
Yeah,
Because we've all been there, right?
yeah,
Beautiful websites or apps that are just, well, a headache to use.
absolutely. It's that exact gap between, visual appeal and
Yeah.
genuine usability. And the insights we're exploring today, they come from this really valuable co-authored article.
Okay.
What really struck me was the perspective from Anika Voss, one of the authors. She's a UI, UX, and brand designer.
Right.
And her focus on empathy-driven design, visual storytelling,
Right.
it really shapes the core ideas here. It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So our aim today is to understand how good design fosters that crucial trust. We want to pinpoint the common design flaws that kind of chip away at it and
Mhm.
really dig into why empathetic and accessible design is so powerful. Think of this as gaining a sharper eye for the digital world around you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with that disconnect. Why do we see so much visually impressive design that just, well, doesn't work?
Well, what's interesting, and the article points this out, is that users often don't consciously register good design.
Huh.
If something works seamlessly, they get the job done, move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the frustrating experiences, the bad ones,
Yeah.
that truly stand out
They really do stick in your mind.
and leave that lasting negative impression.
Yeah. You remember the struggle, the wasted clicks? Ugh. And that brings us neatly to what the article calls dark patterns. Can you give us a clear picture of what those are?
Sure. Essentially, dark patterns are these design choices that are, well, intentionally deceptive. They aim to trick users into doing something they wouldn't normally choose to do.
Okay, like what?
The article gives a prime example.
Yeah.
Those incredibly difficult cancellation processes, the ones
Oh, yeah, the worst.
where the unsubscribe button is basically hidden or the contrast is so low you can barely see it.
No.
Or you have to click through like 5 different screens just to confirm you want to leave.
It feels deliberately obstructive, doesn't it? Like they're actively trying to trap you.
Exactly. And the article also mentions something that seems maybe aesthetic, but has a huge impact. Super light gray text.
Right, you see that everywhere. Looks modern, I guess.
It looks trendy, yeah.
Yeah.
But from an accessibility standpoint, like the article says, it's often just a conscious disregard for guidelines.
Guide
Yeah, the WCAG Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Mm.
They set standards for contrast to make sure things are readable for everyone, including people with low vision. Using that super light gray often fails those standards.
So it's choosing looks over making sure everyone can actually read it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Prioritizing a trend over inclusivity. And that damages trust.
Definitely. And then there are the infamous unlabeled icons. The articles take "give me labels with my icons" or "give me death." That really resonated.
Huh. Yeah, it's a strong stance, but it makes a point.
Why is that clarity so vital, though? For trust.
It really just boils down to clear communication.
Mm.
Without labels, users are guessing. Is this icon save? Is it download? Is it something else?
The article had that funny goat example.
Exactly. It illustrates the ambiguity perfectly. That lack of clarity leads to mistakes, frustration, and if you can't confidently figure out how to use an interface, how can you trust it with anything important?
Good point. It's about respecting the user's effort, their time. Now, the article also mentions, and I thought this was interesting, that not all inaccessible design is malicious. It quotes, "Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by ignorance."
That's a really important nuance, yeah. Sometimes designers might just not know better. They might lack awareness or training in accessibility best practices.
Okay, so ignorance, not malice.
Potentially.
Mm.
But the article argues that once a designer learns about accessibility, it becomes fundamental. It's the pinnacle of empathetic design, it says. It shifts from being just a box to tick
Uh-huh.
to being a core design value.
And why is that shift towards empathy so critical in design?
Because designing for accessibility means you're thinking about a much wider range of human needs and abilities. The article emphasizes that designers are, in a way, kind of like gatekeepers for the internet.
Gatekeepers, how so?
Well, by prioritizing accessibility, they ensure digital spaces are open and usable for everyone. It's inherently trust-building. It signals the design is for all users, not just some narrow ideal. Empathetic designers, the article stresses, will always put usability and trust above just following the latest trend.
It's user-centeredness at its core. To really get those user needs, the article talks about immersing in the user experience, It even compares it to method acting.
Yeah, that analogy with actors like Christian Bale or Heath Ledger who completely dive into a role,
Right.
it really highlights the kind of deep understanding needed. To design well for people you might never meet, you need to really try and grasp their motivations, their limitations, their context.
So how do you do that practically?
The article stresses the value of creating user personas, even if it feels a bit, I don't know, weird or silly sometimes.
Like the example they use, Bob Buchanan with low motor control. How does thinking about a specific persona like Bob help?
Because it makes the challenges concrete. Instead of just thinking, make it easy to click, you think about Bob, who has limited motor control.
Okay.
And as the article points out, that might lead you to make the touch targets just a few pixels bigger. Seems small, right?
Yeah.
But for someone like Dob, that tiny change can make a massive difference in usability. It turns an abstract problem into a human one.
That makes sense. And the article lists key questions an empathetic designer should ask. What are some of those?
Oh, it's a great list. Things like, who are the actual users? Why are they here? What do they need to accomplish? What's the bounce rate telling us? Where are their pain points? What frustrates them? And crucially, considering specific demographics, people learning the language,
Right.
users with physical limitations, folks using screen readers.
So really diverse needs.
Absolutely. And the article really pushes for comprehensive user surveys, ones that capture rich demographic details, not just generic feedback.
It's about moving beyond assumptions, really understanding the people you're designing for. Now, the article, drawing on Anika Voss's expertise, lays out a framework for building trust through design. Can you walk us through those points?
Yeah, absolutely. Her framework, as it's detailed in the article, is really practical. First, can users complete tasks intuitively? Just doesn't make sense.
Okay, number one, intuitive.
Second, transparency.
Yeah.
Is the purpose clear? Especially if you're trying to sell something. Be upfront.
Right. No hidden agendas.
Third, visual credibility. Does it look trustworthy? The article hilariously contrasts this with classified ads from car magazines circa 1995.
Huh. Yeah, you don't want that look.
Definitely not. Fourth, reliability. Fewer broken links, fewer 404s, less weird redirects.
Oh.
Stuff needs to work.
Technical soundness. Got it.
And fifth, meet users where they are. Understand their context. The example given is designing a site for 5-year-olds, obviously. That needs a totally different approach than designing for, say, engineers.
Makes perfect sense.
And the article is very clear. Trust breaks down when users feel misled, ignored, frustrated, or run into those dark patterns we talked about.
It really is about respect for the user, isn't it? That framework nails it. Now, established design patterns often help build trust because they're familiar, but the article also tackles when it might be okay to break those conventions.
That's a tricky one. The article rightly says patterns are guidelines, not, rigid laws.
But
But it also warns against changing things just for the sake of it. Like messing with the standard placement of a hamburger menu, usually a bad idea.
yeah, don't make me hunt for the menu.
Exactly. So when thinking about breaking a convention, the article says you need to really weigh the potential value. Like, is this genuinely better or more engaging
Yeah.
against the risk of confusing people?
How do you weigh that?
A/B testing is mentioned as a really valuable tool here. Test the new idea against the standard. See what users actually prefer, what works better.
Data, not just guesswork.
Right. And he gives a cool example of a design studio that used this innovative grid menu. It was different, but still functional and engaging. It worked. But it also makes the point that, a creative brand has more leeway than, say, a government website where familiarity and clarity are absolutely paramount.
Context matters. So intentional, tested changes can be good, but novelty alone isn't enough. Okay, how do we measure trust? Does the article mention metrics?
It definitely highlights bounce rate as a key early indicator.
Bounce rate, why that specifically?
Because the article points out the incredibly short time you have, like 50 milliseconds for a user to decide if a site feels trustworthy.
Wow, 50 milliseconds. That's instant.
Basically, yeah. And maybe 10 to 20 seconds for them to figure out if it actually meets their needs. If people are bouncing immediately, it often signals a lack of trust or that they just can't quickly find what they expected.
Yeah. That's a crazy tight window. Really underscores the importance of first impressions. Okay, what about when, inevitably, business goals seem to clash with these user-centered principles? How does the article suggest designers handle that?
It frames design as problem solving, first off. And dealing with stakeholder feedback is described as an art form.
Huh. I bet it is.
The general advice is to find middle ground where possible, except when it compromises accessibility. That's presented as non-negotiable.
Okay, accessibility is the line.
Yes. And the article stresses how effective it is to use data and information in those discussions with stakeholders. Bring the evidence. Show, don't just tell. It fosters more informed decisions, more collaboration, rather than just opinion versus opinion.
Data as the great persuader again. Makes sense. The article also points out some simple accessibility fixes that can have a really big impact. What are some of those sort of low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, it lists 3 common big oversights. First is low contrast again, referencing those WKG guidelines and tools like the WebAIM contrast checker to get it right.
Okay, contrast. Easy fix.
Second, tiny elements. Buttons or links that are hard to click, especially on mobile. It advocates for larger touch targets.
Oh, yeah. The fat finger problem.
Exactly. And third, missing alt text for images. Crucial for people using screen readers, but also good for SEO. Site crawlers understand the image.
Right, benefits everyone.
And the article notes these are just the basics, kind of the starting point for the full WCAG 2.2 guidelines.
Still, fundamental things that can make a huge difference. Now let's talk positive examples. Does the article mention any brands that are doing a good job balancing the visuals with that user-centered clarity?
It does. It highlights a few. Balance, the meditation app, gets praised for intuitive navigation and really thoughtful interactions.
Okay, balance.
MailChimp comes up too for its clear mega menus. And interestingly, its evolving button hover states. Just nice little touches.
MailChimp, yeah, they have a distinct style.
Finch, a habit tracker app, is mentioned for being charming and using gamification well.
Fun, okay.
And Spotify gets a shout-out for its cross-device playback feature, like starting music on your laptop and picking it up seamlessly on your phone. That shows a deep understanding of how people actually use the service.
That is a great feature. It's good to see companies getting it right. And speaking of those positive experiences, the article talks about the power of delight in design. How does that fit in with trust?
Well, those thoughtful little interactions, the micro-interactions, they can really make a design stand out. The article suggests they differentiate exceptional designs.
Like the MailChimp button hover you mentioned.
Exactly like that. Those small, positive, maybe slightly unexpected moments can build brand recognition, make the experience feel more human, and foster a stronger connection. It contributes to that overall feeling of quality and care.
But I imagine you can overdo it.
Oh, definitely. The article cautions against excessive or really long animations. Keep them brief, like 100 to 200 milliseconds. They should enhance, not obstruct. It gives an example of a long hover animation that just gets annoying if you accidentally trigger it repeatedly.
Right, it needs to be subtle. And tested, presumably.
Always tested. That's a constant refrain. Test, test, test.
Okay, so delight is good, but use it wisely. Finally, the article wraps up with some solid advice for designers who want to build these trust-focused experiences. What should they start doing?
It offers some great actionable points. First, talk to each other. Network. Use other designers as extended brain space, as it puts it.
Share knowledge. Good one.
Second, study the world. Look beyond screens, art, nature, music. Document things that inspire you.
Broaden horizons. Okay.
Third, experiment. Don't just stick to the safe path. The article suggests creating a most likely to succeed version and maybe a class clown version of a design, just to push boundaries.
I like that. Play around a bit.
Fourth, keep learning. Design evolves so fast, you have to stay curious.
Lifelong learning, yeah.
And fifth, maybe the most important, be human. Bring that human touch, that empathy, into the work.
Fantastic advice. Really practical stuff. So the central theme, weaving through all of this, really seems to be that the best designs, the ones that truly succeed, prioritize intuition, accessibility, and trustworthiness over just looking cool. They respect the user.
Exactly.
And the article concludes with that powerful thought: every pixel should have a purpose. And that purpose isn't to impress, it's to inform.
Precisely. It's a shift in focus, isn't it? Away from just pretty pictures towards creating digital tools that are genuinely useful, accessible, and build that lasting trust.
So the key takeaway from this deep dive, really illuminated by the insights in this co-authored article and especially Anika Voss's perspective, is that trust isn't just a nice to have, it's fundamental. It's baked into effective design through usability, accessibility, and real empathy. We need to look past the pretty pixels. And as you go about your day interacting with countless websites and apps, maybe try looking at them through this lens. Notice the designs that feel seamless, that earn your trust, and contrast them with the ones that, well, create friction or make you hesitate.
Yeah, and maybe consider this. How do the digital tools you rely on every day either empower you because they're designed so well, or how do they subtly undermine your trust and maybe even your efficiency? What small changes, perhaps inspired by what we discussed, could make the biggest difference in your own digital life?